Okay, so this is the next episode of No Apologies, Guilt and Blame. It's the third book in my series, Life Beyond Silence. The first book was titled Not a Victim, a Survivor, Life Beyond Domestic Violence and Rape. And the second book was titled Losing Touch with Reality. All three books in the series, I decided to do a podcast on them basically so that I thought it would be another avenue so that listeners could ask me questions or make comments and I could address those or do the best I could basically to address them. I know you can find my first book, Not a Victim, on Amazon. It's at Barnes and Nobles and other avenues. And this, to be honest, the second book and the third book, I haven't had the time to upload them to Amazon, but I will get to that. I promise. I guess you would say I want to make sure that anybody that's living through abuse or trauma or pain or a life such as mine, where it seems like every time you turn around you're making the wrong decision, I guess I just want them to know they're not alone. And that if I've learned anything over all these years, especially since the books were written quite a while ago, I guess I've learned that you can make peace with the decisions that you've made in life, no matter how traumatic or troubling, disturbing they may have been. I think all of us are looking for forgiveness in our life for things, for whatever reason. And it's hard to find forgiveness. It's almost something in my family that's just unheard of. But I think in my aspect, I decided, okay, they're never going to think of me in any good way. Obviously, especially when it comes to close family members, I guess I just was always labeled the black sheep of the family, and I've accepted that. Because I guess more so because I just feel like, okay, I'm guilty. I'll take all the blame. I did so many things I shouldn't have done. I did so many things I regret. And I'm sorry. And if I could take them back, I would. But how do you take things back that you've done in your life? It's been decades since I have really had my life just plummet into hell. And everything used to hurt a lot worse than it does now. It still hurts. But eventually I got to where I was accepting, I guess, of the hurt. Realizing, I can't blame anybody for things that I did. I have to take the blame for every bad choice I made in life. And I think I always knew that. It was just really hard for me to not think that someday they would forgive me. Everybody. And I think for the most part, three of my children have always stayed in contact with me. They've always somewhat accepted that I'm sorry, that things happened a long time ago, that I was so much a different person back then. Not that I've completely changed my spots. Of course I haven't. But I think they see that, over time, it's time to just accept this was what happened and move on more than anything. Because you can't change it, but they all know that I love them, and they all know that or I'll say that three of them know that I love them and that I'm sorry and that I wish I could go back and change things, but you can't. You just gotta let it go at some point. Which is kind of what I've done. I beat myself up for the things that I did, but does that change anything? No, it doesn't. And I've had to live with a lot of pain, so after a long period of time, you just accept that it is what it is. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do to change it? There's nothing I can do that I can think of. And I guess you just find peace. You just give it up to God and I've said it before in this podcast, I know God knows what's in my heart. And He knows that I have regretted things for a long, long time. And that if I could go back and change it, I would. But I think that a lot of the weight of the pain, even though I still carry it, has shifted. And I think I mentioned this before in one of the podcasts, but my mother has a way of bringing up things, and she has said lots of things over the years, and it used to hurt a lot worse. But now I find myself often more bitter than ever at her. Just like she carries a lot of bitterness, I'm starting to too. Especially when it comes to her. And now when she brings up things, I'll actually stand up. I used to never really get in a good comeback at her. She always had a way of really punching my gut, and not in a real way, but like she could really hit home and like hurt me. She would have a way of saying things that would just cut deep. And after all these years, I've very much gotten to be like her. I'm bitter when it comes to her remarks. And I've noticed in the past few years, I take her remarks easier than I used to. And I usually have some kind of comeback where I didn't a while back. I think when it got to be just me by myself with my little dog, and everything in my past is in my past, so it's just been me for years. I think by the time I reached that point, I was able to take her blows a lot easier. So when she would punch at me with words and say how deserving I was for this to happen, or that I was always the one that was disappointing, or however she would try to hurt me, I guess I would just say, well, no, I'll give you an example, actually. I said it in another podcast, but I'll say it again. She recently, this has not been too long ago, but she recently said, so you were in that domestic violence situation with Walker. She said, how come you didn't, fight back? You know, if it was happening the way you say it was happening, all the time. And she said she had heard that he had poured hot water on me, or held my head under hot water, or something like that. And she said, I would never let anybody hurt me. Why would you do that? Why would you stay in a relationship like that? And I said, what in the hell are you talking about? And she said, well, I'm just asking. And I'm like, well, first of all, he's dead. This has been years now that all of this has happened. Decades. And this is the first time you've ever brought up anything like this, especially out of the blue. So what the hell are you even talking about? Or why are you even bringing this up? And she's like, well, just asking. And to be honest, maybe she's listening to my podcast. I don't know. I don't know that she's not. She would never tell me if she was or wasn't anyway. But she said, why would you even put up with that? Or why wouldn't you fight back? I don't know how she put it, actually, but my comment to her was, I don't know why you're bringing this up. You know, I was told by someone I knew that she called you one time when I was screaming and told you about it and asked if I guess you were going to come to my aid. And she said that you said that I deserved it. And for her never to call you again. And she said, oh, bullshit. And I was like, okay, well, that's just what somebody told me. And I said, I never said anything to you about it, because it was like several years ago, a long time after he'd already been dead. And it's just not necessary to talk about it, bring it up, think about it. Just no way. There's no reason to. There's like no reason to bring it up, talk about it. I mean, there is for me, if I want to talk about it, like on this podcast or something, if I want to talk about my domestic violence situation, I should be able to. But there's no reason. Number one, the lady was telling me, because she was apologizing, because she thought about it so many times, how she had called you and how you had said that. But at the time that she told me, he was already dead. What would have been the point for me to bring it up to you that you didn't respond in a nice way to her, and you sure didn't come to my aid? What would it had mattered? I just decided to swallow it, be the bigger person, and not bring it up. Just not necessary. And I said, so my question to you is, why are you bringing this shit up after decades? You knew that I was being beaten. You knew that he was an addict. You knew that he was an alcoholic. You knew that I was in a troubled marriage. Whether you knew the details, I don't know. It's not like I went around saying it, because I would have only been hurt worse. But you knew some of it. And it didn't surprise me when that woman said that. And I said to my mother, who had just asked me those questions, it doesn't matter. You've never been in a domestic violence relationship. Lots of people haven't. And lots of people have comments like that. Why didn't you pick up the skillet? Why didn't you hit them back? Why didn't you leave the minute it happened? And it doesn't work like that. Domestic violence is about power. And Walker, I loved him with all my heart, and I know he loved me, but he was a completely different person when he was drugged up and when he was drinking. He was a different person. And I don't know that he even knew what he was doing. I knew that he understood that he had hurt me the day after, but he would just go back to drinking and doing drugs and do it all over again. But as far as him not being able to control himself, I couldn't have done anything. And there were times I did try. I hid from him. I tried to get rid of his drugs. I did try to walk on eggshells and not to provoke him. But I was scared to death of him. And nobody understands domestic violence enough, even to this day. I mean, if you've never lived that kind of life, you don't understand what it's like to be in a relationship where somebody makes you so scared, not only for your life, but they make you so scared that you can't think. And even when you think about leaving or about how to get out, you're scared. What will they do if I try? I think I was lucky that he did love me, because I think when I filed for divorce and had him served, I think he realized that I was sick of it and that I was done. And I know there was a time or two that he did try to break me after I had already had him served. But I think he saw that I was done. And maybe there was something inside of him that made him stay away. But ultimately, when I had moved to Louisiana with Phil, we got a phone call. Actually, from my mother, I got a phone call saying that he had killed himself. That's probably the one and only true time that she asked me if I was okay. And I remember I just kind of sat there on the phone with her, and she asked me if I heard what she said, and I said, yeah. I said, what happened? And she said that he shot himself, and that he was actually the one that called 911 because he didn't die right away, and he made it to the hospital. The ambulance got him to the hospital, but he didn't live long. And that she thought Ellen had made it to the hospital to say goodbye, or was there when he passed. That's his daughter, my stepdaughter, at one time. And she said, are you okay? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't know how to react to that. And I didn't. I mean, I can remember not knowing how to react. I felt like he probably was messed up. He probably had been drinking and doing drugs. And I doubted very seriously if he even knew what he was doing enough to know that he maybe pointed it at his head and didn't mean to, but that he had probably no idea what he was doing. And I remember thinking, I don't know what to say. Yeah, I think he probably already knew that I couldn't help him with his demons. And I know for a fact he knew I loved him. And he knew that I felt bad that he was gone. But I didn't have an answer for how I felt at that moment. I mean, I said it before. I loved him. I know I did. And I know he loved me. But it was a hard marriage. A hard life. Being in a domestic violence relationship is, for lack of another word, sickening in every way. You're scared and you can't believe someone that loves you will hurt you like that. And you don't know how to help them. And I said this before once upon a time too, but when I was married to him, I was an EMT and I was working at the hospital, and he would get so fucked up. And one time he was laying on the floor and he had pissed on himself, and he was belligerent and he was passing out. And the hurt was already done, you know. Like every time I was around him, I walked on eggshells, and whenever he would strike out on me, then, or strike out at me, I should say, I hid from him. And I remember I had, at that moment, came out from my hiding place, and I was watching him breathe as he was laying passed out in a drug-induced, alcoholic state. And I would have never hurt him like he hurt me. I would have never kicked him or hit him in the head or anything. Mainly because I was too scared that he'd wake up and hurt me more or kill me if I couldn't get away. But I remember staring at him breathing, thinking, please stop breathing. Just stop. And then I'm going to stand here and I'm going to watch, even though I know how to save you. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to watch and count and make sure that you're dead. And then I'm going to leave. Or I'm going to go, I'm going to leave. Or I'm going to go hide again. Or I'm going to go to bed and pretend that I was asleep and didn't know you quit breathing. Or I'm going to go away, go get in the car, drive off, and pretend that I went to the store or I went somewhere else. And then I came home and found you like this. But I remember thinking, just stop breathing. And then I'm going to stand here long enough to make sure you're dead. To make sure that you can't be revived. And then I'm going to leave. And I know to some people that sounds ominous and unbelievable. Disturbing in every way. Horrific that I would even say it. I agree with all of those things. But when you're in a domestic violence relationship and somebody that beats you, somebody that breaks your soul, I mean, he might hit me, he might punch me, he might kick me, he might bite me, he might pull my hair, he might do all of those things. But the one thing that really broke me was him holding me down, saying horrible things, and drooling in my face. And he thought it was so funny. Number one, he knew I didn't like it. And number two, if I tried to turn away, well, I couldn't. You know, because he got it all over me. And he'd smear it. And he'd try to get it in my mouth and my eyes and stuff. And he just thought it was hysterically funny. And I think I just was slowly broken. I mean, I loved him. I loved him. And we had some good times in the beginning. But he wasn't himself when he was fucked up. And like I said, I don't even know if he knew for sure that he was using me as a punching bag. Or hurting me. But I do remember that time. I do remember just watching him breathe. And praying he stopped. Anyway, getting back to the episode. In the last episode, I had talked about Phil and me going back and forth. And how, you know, he left, finally. Finally, he walks out on me after he's caused me to lose my daughter. Yes, I know I left her, but there was a lot of promises there that he made to me. And I did love him. And I did have a son by him that he had eventually, or would at the time, eventually take from me, along with the woman that decided to put herself in the middle of our family. But anyway, I have a grown son that still to this day doesn't fully grasp, I think, what all happened, how it happened, how bad I hurt. And over the years, it's like everything else, gotten easier to get past what all happened. Even when it comes to my ex, Phil, and his wife that he eventually married. that he left me for. And I think at first, even before my son left to live with them, I was so bitter. And I was so angry that I think Phil knows that my anger is towards him, but it's more towards her than anything, for just doing that to another woman. I mean, that's probably the one thing I wouldn't have ever done, knowingly done, would be see a married man and take him away from his kids and his family. When I met Kyle, he was still married, but they didn't have any kids, and she and him was already in the process of deciding if they wanted a divorce, and I didn't take him. I told him, it takes two people, so you need to go work it out or decide if it's not workable. But if her heart's not in it and she wants a divorce, then give her one, because it won't work unless both of you are in. And the funny part is, I'm saying that, and literally that's what happened to me and him. Both people have to want the marriage, or there is no marriage. And that's what happened to me and Kyle. There was no marriage anymore. We were going out separately. I met Phil. Next thing you know, I asked Kyle for a divorce. And the next thing you know, I remarried. Or not remarried, but married my fourth husband, Phil. Which I deeply regret. I don't regret my son, but I regret ever meeting Phil. I regret believing his words. I regret believing his apologies. And to be honest, there's a lot of things I don't know why happened. I talked about some of them in the last episode. I wish I knew how many affairs he actually truly did have, or how many sex with other women that he actually did have during our close to 10 years relationship. But I guess I should explain. We met each other in, I want to say, 1989. And we got married in 1990. And we got our divorce in 92. And then my son was 9 when he left us, after begging me to stay with him, and after promising me that if I did come back to him, that he would never hurt me again, that he loved me, would always love me, and would never, ever hurt me again. And when I say hurt, I mean like affairs, masturbating in the Kmart parking lot, doing anything like that. He knew that he broke my heart. And then he still broke my heart again when he took my son. So yeah, over the years, that was a festering thing for me that just seemed to like burn at my soul. And yeah, I thought about a million times what I would ever say or do if I ran into him and her, but mainly her. I knew if he was ever with her, there'd be no way for me to like even do anything towards her. But yeah, he knew that was festering. But over the years, I've gotten older, and not that I still wouldn't say my piece, but which might be good for me, but probably not something that will ever transpire. But no, when it comes to that whole situation with Phil, now that I have gotten older, I pretty much don't give a shit anymore. You know, he hurt me and broke my heart. And I yet am to blame for what ultimately happened. Because I'm the fucking fool that left my daughter. Yes, I did it for my son, but I'm the stupid fool that did that. Because if I had stayed my ass in Kentucky and kept my daughter and moved on with the next man who came into my life, then my son would never have been taken, and my daughter would never have been taken unless my first husband had thought of something different to take me to court for. But, or unless I had met somebody worse, God forbid, but possible in every way. Definitely possible in every way. But, yeah. I now have decided that yes, even though that festered for a long time, and even though that broke my heart in every way, shape possible, I now see it as something that ultimately no one's to blame but me. I put up with a marriage that he may have been screwing people the whole time. And when he did what he did, I should have never left Kentucky. Then I would have had my daughter, I would have had my son. Not that my life would have played out in any good way. It could have, but probably more than likely, knowing what a fuck up I am, it wouldn't have. But I now look at it differently. kind of like, I guess I got what I deserved in the end. That he would walk out on me. That all those apologies and begging for forgiveness was for nothing. That I was the one that deserved this. I deserved this. I chose to leave my daughter so that my son could grow up with his dad. So I deserved him walking out on me. First strike, second strike, third strike, however many strikes you want. And then I deserved, in the end, for him to take my son. Because I'm just that fucked up of a person. Okay, I'm going to stop here at this moment. I always make my podcast too long, and I don't mean to. And I will be back. Thank you for listening.